So for everybody who's missed the first 5 minutes of that recording, just know that you didn't miss anything. This is, we're talking about credit. Next time we're gonna talk about home purchase. We're gonna go over stuff. Apologies for missing 2 minutes. You should have been here. Yeah. Okay, so a couple questions. So normally we have these questions that we would ask a client beforehand. So these are just some kind of questions that you could be asking yourself about this, kind of like, what general financial concerns do I have? So whenever you're starting a new topic, it's always important to just like, what big financial concerns do I have right now? Hopefully it's the thing you're doing research on, you're about to talk about, but it could be something totally different, right? So we may talk about credit because we have a big purchase coming up that we're worried about, and we want to make sure we have good credit in place. Or we may be looking at credit because we just made a big purchase and we're going to see how bad it's going to fuck us up. Have you uploaded your most recent credit report? Basically, have you downloaded your credit report? Does everybody know their credit score? Does anybody not know their credit score? Just waiting for the non-video people to show me hands or not. All right. Is everybody happy with their credit score? There's a thumbs up. Thank you, Sonia. Happy-ish? All right, cool. That's kind of the place to be honest. So good job, maybe. Any issues with identity theft? So I'll talk about identity theft again at the end, but if anybody has any particular stories they want to share, we'll be there for that. And then on a scale of 0 to 5, how confident are we in credit? I assume we're going to have a wide range there of how confident we are. But all right, so whenever we talk about credit, the first place we're going to have to start is the Fair and Accurate Credit Transactions Act, or the FACT Act, which I hate saying repeatedly. So this is a legislation back from 2003 where it allowed every US resident to receive one free credit report from each of the 3 major credit reporting agencies, which are Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion. So once per year, you can go to them and get a free credit report. This bill also did a couple other things. It talked about freezing your credit, which we'll talk about later. It set up provisions to help reduce identity theft. That was one of them. It requires for the secure disposal of consumer information, but it does not require them to give you their scores. So if you pulled your credit report, you may have seen it had no score anywhere on it. That's because the credit report and the credit score are totally different. One is obviously a derivative of the other, but they are not the same. So some misconceptions. So these are some things that we've heard from other clients. Hey, your credit score drops if you check your credit. This was actually a really big misconception for a long time. People thought, I can't check my credit because if I check it, it'll go down, and I don't want it to go down. I want it to stay high. So I can never check it. I'll never know. That's not a good plan. So checking your own credit does not do anything to your score. It's what's called a soft inquiry. So there's 2 different types of inquiries, meaning people looking into your credit. There's soft and hard. So soft inquiries are just people checking your credit. Hard inquiry is when you're actually applying for credit. So you're looking for new credit. That's when you get a hard inquiry. Those are the ones we care about. Another misconception is closing old accounts improves your credit score. There's not a lot of if-then statements in this, right? So with credit scores, it's going to be very subjective. So there's not so much I can say, if you do this, this will happen. But generally, closing an old account doesn't necessarily improve your score. It may actually hurt your score at first, and then it may help you in the long run. But old accounts stay on your credit report for a long time, and we'll talk about that in a minute. Once you pay off an account with a derogatory mark, it's removed from your credit report. That's completely false. Derogatory marks, meaning anything negative, which we'll talk about in a minute, stay on your report for 7 to 10 years, whether or not the account is still open. So closing an old account or paying it off does not remove that from happening. The only way it gets removed from your account is when it times out, meaning the 7 or 10 years have already passed. Another misconception, being a cosigner does not make you responsible for an account. That's exactly what being a cosigner does, is it makes you responsible for an account. So we try to never cosign for somebody if you can avoid it, and hopefully you never have to have someone cosign for you, because it just makes like Thanksgiving dinners really awkward when one person can't pay their bills and now the other person is responsible for it. So we never want to cosign if we can avoid it. And then you hear things like, oh, paying off your debt will add 50 to 150 points to your credit score. Again, there is no if-then statement. If your credit score was already capped out, like paying off your debt doesn't do anything. If your credit score is super low, paying off debt may do more than that. So there's no guaranteed return on that. So does that make sense? Anybody else have like a myth or something they think is true, but they're not sure that they want to ask about real fast? Kind of fit into the same category? No? All right, well, we'll cross that bridge. So how does credit work? This is the basic circle of debt. You do something that's reported to a creditor adds it to, or sends it to the crediting agency. So this would be me, this would be, I don't know, LA Fitness. You know, I get my membership to LA Fitness, the gym. LA Fitness says, hey, he paid his monthly bill. So he sends that to the reporting agency, which could be TransUnion. TransUnion adds that information to my credit report. My credit report is used to derive my credit score, and my credit score is used against me for future credit granting decisions in a positive or negative light. Does that make sense? Pretty straightforward, but in a circle. All right, so the credit report itself. So what is a credit report, right? A credit report is just a record sourced by your creditors of an individual's different credit loans, payments, and schedules. So back in the old days, I could go to a local general store and I could say, hey, I need 40 pounds of flour for my farm, and I'll pay you later. And they'd be like, yeah, Robert, we know you're good for it. Don't worry about it. Target doesn't work that way. I can't just go to Target, ask for a Nintendo Switch, and tell them I'll pay them next week. First of all, they don't have any Nintendo Switches. I've checked. But if they did, they still wouldn't give it to me, right? So the credit report is a way that they can review that and say, yeah, this person pays their bills on time, right? Again, it does not show your credit score. It just shows information. So what information exactly? So it should say your personal information. Hey, this is who this person is. This is Robert Lopez. This is the house he lives at. This is his age. This is where he's lived a whole bunch of places, actually. This is where maybe they work. And then these are all the accounts that they have, right? So it should have the different companies that I have credit with, the type and amount of that loan or credit limit, and then how often I paid and if I paid on time, right? So what else is on there? It should have really the good, the bad, and the ugly. So we'll start with the bad and the ugly. Adverse accounts, right? So an adverse account is defined as anything that a future creditor or potential creditor may consider negative when making a credit granting decisions, right? So anything that could look bad. Those are generally going to remain on your report for 7 to 10 years. So if I ever went through a bankruptcy, chapter 11, chapter 13, whatever, if I had any unpaid taxes, if I had a foreclosure, a civil judgment, missed payments, wage garnishments, anything like that, those are adverse accounts and derogatory marks. So those stay on your report for 7 to 10 years, depending on the type. So to make up for that, they also have to show the good stuff. So any satisfactory accounts, so any accounts that you have in good standing, that you pay your bills on time, no blemishes or anything, those stay on there for 10 years. So if I have 2 accounts that are the exact same age, I do a bad thing in one of them, that bad thing will stay on there for 7 years. If it's all good, it'll stay there for 10 years. So the good will outweigh the bad in the long run. It just takes time. So everything on here will get tracked. So depending on who ran your report, right? So if you went through TransUnion, Equifax, or Experian, the way that they're going to track it is going to look a little differently, but the data is going to be basically the same. Do we have data or not? Are they current? You may see okay, you may see a check mark, you may see a green box. Were there any late payments, 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, 120 plus days? Is anything in collections, surrender, repossession, charge off, meaning canceled, or foreclosure? They'll have a little key down here to tell you what all they are. We're looking for green boxes everywhere. There's one of them, I think it's Experian. They just use black and white. So we want everything to say okay. That's really annoying. I hate looking at that. I like to see green, but any questions about that? Not yet. Okay, cool. Very sharing group today. I love it. So why do I care? Why do I check my credit report? Mostly to confirm the accuracy. So according to the FTC, the Federal Trade Commission, 1 in 5 credit reports have an error on them. So 1 in 5, 20% have an error. Of those errors, 25% of those errors are bad enough to affect your credit score. Of those, 5% are bad enough to give you like a higher interest rate or deny you credit because the error is so bad, right? But 80% of all those errors can be corrected by simply disputing it and making a claim. So I have an example. We moved from Arizona to California, so a bunch of stuff got messed up. And I was checking my credit reports one day. on my credit scores to be specific. And I had 3 different scores. There were 2 of them were really similar, and one of them was like 50 or 60 points less. And I'm like, yo, WTF, mate. So I dig into it and I'm looking at my report and I'm comparing like, hey, what is this account from this company I've never heard of? So I look up the company online and it's like, this is a weed dispensary in LA. And I'm like, well, first of all, I don't really smoke weed. And if I did, I wouldn't go to LA for it. I can get weed here. So like, why would I need to go to LA? So I call TransUnion, the credit reporting agency. I'm like, hey, this bill is fraudulent. I need you to cancel this off my thing. They're like, yeah, no problem. So I'm disputing it. And they say, hey, can I get some more information on it? Like, tell me more about this thing. Like, oh, it's like a $40 bill. I'm like, well, that's not very much weed at all. So somebody is like cheap. So I'm looking into it more and it turns out it's not a weed dispensary because of course it's not. It's actually my doctor's office here in Phoenix. Their billing department has just the same name. So I had a bill from a doctor's office that they never told any of the other reporting agencies about. They never told me about, and they never charged me any late fees. I just owed them $40. So I could confirm my accuracy. By checking these credit reports, I was able to catch this $40 bill before it became a problem and then find out about it. Does that make sense? All right. It helps you fight against identity theft too, right? So I thought someone had stolen my identity for $40 worth of weed, which was just a waste. I feel like my identity is worth a little more than that. So someone's identity is stolen basically every 3 seconds in the US. It's 11.6 million Americans have dealt with this problem. And if you've ever been through it, it just costs time, money, possibly your reputation if it decreases your credit score so bad that you get denied for something that you think you should be getting. I'm sure everybody here has had like, your credit card information stolen. Your bank maybe has called you and say, hey, did you just go to a Village Inn bakery in upstate New York? And you're like, no, I didn't. Okay, we're going to cancel your card and send you a new one. Yeah, no problem. I once had my Xbox Live account stolen and someone went through Xbox Live and used my PayPal and spent like $5,000 on PayPal, like within a few seconds. Luckily, PayPal gave me all that money back, right? No problem, no harm, no foul. Just time was the issue. So we want to fight against identity theft. So tracking our credit is a great way to do that. And it should give you peace of mind, right? So at the very least, you can say, all right, everything's cool. You look at your credit report, it comes back 6 months later, I check it again. I know I haven't done anything. I haven't opened any new lines of credit. So if everything looks the same, I can be like, okay, cool, we're all right. It doesn't necessarily mean everything's perfect, but it should give me a little more comfort than warm and fuzzies. All right, so if we do get an adverse account, right? So if we look on here, we can see that this is Tim Baker. So this is Big Boss Tim. Tim paid a late bill, right? So 30 days late right here. So that was May of 2010, long time ago, but it actually stayed on the report for a long time. So that 30 days late is just going to sit there. On here, we can see all these green OKs. Those are fine. The NDs just means no data. So it means for some reason it didn't get reported, no problem. Inquiries, we talked about hard inquiries and soft inquiries. On here, we can see, he had 2 hard inquiries, Chase and Kohl's, got to get that Kohl's cash. And then he also had a soft inquiries. Got to get that Kohl's cash, Carol. The soft inquiries are sometimes just banks looking into you. So it looks like he applied to Kohl's on the 15th, but Kohl's, go away. Kohl's looked into him in January of the next year. So they just did a review on his account. So reviewing his account January of the following year did not affect his credit because it was not applying for new credit. So it counted as a soft inquiry. Does that make sense? A little bit? All right. How to dispute. Again, you can do what I do and you just call people. I generally like to talk, as you can tell. So I call people. I got too many head shakes there. So I call people up and just kind of say the error. You can also go online. So you can go on Experian. You can just basically say, hey, there's an inaccuracy. This account's painful. This is unauthorized. This is an ex-spouse. Hopefully no one has to go through that. I think they even have text services now, so you can go through that process, but it's pretty simple to dispute a claim. When you do dispute a claim, the onus is actually on the other organization to prove that it really was you. So they should help you pretty easily. Dashboards, if anybody uses the dashboards, right? So if you pull your credit report through annualcreditreport.com, which is the link we sent you, and you clicked on one of the agencies to pull your report, they probably offered you some credit monitoring service. Had you gone through that service, this is kind of what those look like. Or if you ever go through Credit Karma or Discover Card has one. A lot of banks have these for free. You should be able to see your credit score on one of those services. You can look at your old scores, reports. You can do a credit lock, which is something we'll talk about here in a little bit, and just kind of gives you information. Is anybody using one of these credit monitoring services? Credit monitoring services are really valuable if you have an anticipation of a big purchase coming up and you just want to make sure everything's cool. If you're going through any kind of credit repair, it may also be good too, so you can see your progress over time. So if you have poor credit now and you want to improve it, a credit monitoring service could just help you track your progress. Or if you have a big purchase next year, again, that may be, let's just make sure everything's okay between now and then. Sometimes they're free through particular banks. I use Discover Bank for my credit card. So they have a credit monitoring service for free. Sometimes you pay for them. They're $3, $6, $10 a month. It's really whatever you feel is appropriate. Credit Karma is a really good one that you can use on the site. So the credit score. So what is the credit score, right? So earlier we talked about the credit report, and the credit report gives all this data. It talks about all the different accounts that I have. It has all this. Well, the credit score is supposed to summarize that data. Rather than everyone who's offering you credit having to go and look at your credit report and say, man, they have these 8 accounts and they have to look it all up. There's just a score. It's a calculation that says this person is good because they're above this number. This person's mediocre because they're below this number. This person's bad. We're not going to give them credit, right? It's supposed to simplify it for the point of sale person. It's supposed to signify how likely you are to pay back your loans over the next 2 to 3 years. Not meaning you're going to pay it all back within 2 to 3 years, but like for the next 2 or 3 years, you'll probably make your payments, is what it's supposed to summarize. So why it matters, right? So some people here may not have any credit because there are people out there that don't like credit. They don't like debt. They don't want anything, right? They just want to live a cash life basis, but credit scores are matter when other people think they're important. So it's not just about you. So it affects whether you can get credit in the future if you need to, right? You may want to live a cash lifestyle, but eventually you're gonna have to buy something above and beyond your current means. Higher scores means you're likely to be more likely to be approved or possibly pay a lower interest rate than others. It could affect your ability to like rent an apartment. A lot of apartment complexes or landlords will actually run your credit. I run credit for my tenants. It could affect the amount of deposit that you need for a utility. When I set up internet in this house, there was like a $50 security deposit, but because I have a good credit score, I didn't have to pay that $50. So because I pay my bills on time, they just assume I'm going to pay my bills on time. That seems like a pretty linear thought. And then another one is potential employers can actually check your credit or request a credit report. And it's basically in their minds to say, yeah, this person's dependable. You know, they pay their bills on time. They'll probably also show up to work on time. That's an argument you could make. So there's a bunch of different scoring systems, right? So we have the score, but like, how do I know where it ranks? So the FICO system is the most common system, right? So 90% of lenders use this FICO system, but even within the FICO system, there's multiple calculations. So like Discover runs like a FICO 6. Another corporation may do a FICO 1, right? And it's just how they weight different categories. In general, they're going to scale between 300 and 850, right? So 850, the top, really difficult to ever get to, kind of silly to try for, but some people make it a game called the Road to 850. Realistically, what we're looking for is 750 plus. Once you're above 750, you qualify for all those best rates, right? So you get the best 0% interest on your next car. You get the lowest interest rates available for your next house. You get guarantee approved for whatever credit card you want to get from Pizza Hut. I'm going to get a Pizza Hut credit card. Yeah, that's a thing. Over 700, still pretty good, right? We can still apply for, we can qualify for most things. We're not really going to have a problem getting a house or anything like that. When we get below 700 is when we're starting to get into where we need to make some repairs, possibly. We probably have either just a very low credit history, meaning we've just not had a lot of experience with credit and we just want to build that up, or we've had some checkered past, right? So we've missed some payments in the past and we just got to work through it. And unfortunately, the only thing to get past that is time. We just got to keep doing the right thing for a longer period of time until everything kind of swoops itself away. Does this all make sense? Head nod, sorry, cool. All right, so I mentioned there's a bunch of different FICO systems, FICO scores. Thanks, Sonia. There was a new one actually that just came out in January. So a new FICO credit system, and it changed a little bit of the calculation, right? So it judges those who fall behind on making payments harsher. So it's really caring about the trends. So if someone's trending upward, like they're in a bad position but they're trending upward, congratulations, you get some bonus points. Someone who is in a good place but trending downward, we're going to be a little more hard on you. So they just want to assume if you're doing good, you're going to keep doing good. If you're doing bad, you're going to keep doing bad. And then another one is unsecured credit. Has anybody ever gotten an unsecured credit line, or like a signature loan, or personal loan, sometimes they're called? So these things are, they used to just be a thing. You just walk into a bank. I did this when I bought my first car. I was in Germany in the military, and I walked in and I said, hey, I need $1,500. And they're like, cool, sign here. And I was like, okay, and like, pay us back. And I was like, all right. So that was all it was. You just sign some paper. There's nothing securing it. It's not like a car loan where they can take your car back. You just get a loan, right? People used to use these for all kinds of things, but the interest rates were always pretty high, right? Interest rates would be like 12%, something like that. So you wouldn't use it for anything if you could avoid it. But now people are using them to hide credit cards, right? So they'll get a credit card debt, which is like 24% sometimes. They'll go out and get a personal loan and pay off their credit cards. So because no one really uses personal loans anymore, the credit card companies are now, or the credit reporting agencies are now just going to assume any personal loan is credit card debt. So it changes the calculation. Does that make sense? Yeah. It's not necessarily a factual thing. It's just how the calculation works. So what are some of the factors, right? So we'll talk about I'll name them and then we'll talk about it a little deeper. So some of the factors that go into this are payment history. So do you pay your bills on time? Credit card utilization, derogatory marks, age of credit, total accounts, and hard inquiries. So let's dig into these a little bit. So payment history, pretty high impact. So this basically makes up 35% of the calculation for your credit score. Do you pay your bills on time? Pretty straightforward. Lenders like to know that you make your payments, so then they'll get their money back, right? If I'm going to loan you money and you have a history of not paying people their money back, I don't want to loan you money. Everybody knows that. You're not going to loan money to your brother if he never pays you back. So that's kind of exactly what that is. It's not just missing payments, it's just late, right? So 30 days late is generally what constitutes a late payment. And then each subsequent 30 days after that is more and more detrimental. So 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, 120 days, right? They get worse and worse and they hurt you more and more. So just like when we looked on Tim's report earlier, that one late payment is going to stay on there for a long time. But also when we looked at Tim's, he had a credit score of 833. So it doesn't, that one payment's not going to hold you back forever, but it is going to stay on your report for a long time, right? And it impacts you pretty fast, right? So an excellent would be 100% of on-time payments. That's what we all want to shoot for. But a bad would just be 97% of payments, right? So that sounds like kind of crazy, but when you think about, like, hey, I have 3 or 4 cards and I make a whole bunch of payments, that's 3 out of 100. So you can kind of move that number pretty fast. The best thing here is just kind of set up some kind of automatic bill pay if you can avoid it. What I like to do is I have an automatic payment for all my cards that it automatically pays the minimum in case I don't pay it. I like to pay my credit cards off throughout the month, but if I forget, let's say I'm on a trip or I'm just, I don't know, not paying attention one month, I want to make sure that I don't get any late payments. So at least the minimum will automatically be paid, right? So that's like $25 or $35. So no matter how hard I am that month for cash, I can probably always pay that $25 or something to avoid a late payment. I'll still be eating interest if I don't pay my bills, but at least it's better than getting a late payment. Does that make sense? So that's something that most people can do kind of right away. Credit card utilization. So this is kind of how much of your credit card limits are you using. So again, really high impact, right? If you max out all your credit cards and you go apply for another credit card, they're going to be like, you maxed out all your other cards. You're probably going to max this one out too. I don't know if you're going to be able to keep affording this, right? You can only kick that can down the road so long before it comes back and hits you. So lenders like to see that you're not using all your available credit. So the thing to do there is just try to keep balances low. Another thing you can do is if you know you're going to carry a balance is you can ask for a credit limit increase, right? So if I have a $10,000 limit and I'm going to carry $5,000, that's 50% utilization. But if I can get my limit increased to $15,000, now it's only a 30% credit card utilization. Does that make sense? So you can actually just go to your credit card companies and just ask for an increase. They could say no, but they could also just say yes. And then boom, now that calculation just changed. We just changed the denominator. So paying down our bills and our credit cards is the preferred solution here. Just don't carry a balance. Live within our means and pay down the debt we already have. But things happen, right? Credit cards are there for a reason when life has unexpected expenses that we're not prepared for. So whenever we have that, we just want to pay it down as fast as we can. Derogatory marks. So these were those things that I said can make those adverse accounts, right? So this is late payments, going into collections, public records, bankruptcy, anything that looks negative on those accounts, they're going to stay on your report. So you want to have less of them, right? So an excellent would have none of them, and then it increases pretty fast. So we fall down that chart pretty quickly. So how do we avoid late payments? Make your payments. How do we avoid going in collections? Make your payments. How do we avoid going to bankruptcy? Make your payments. So this kind of actually goes back to just payment history of, set up an automatic bill pay. And you'll avoid some of those derogatory marks. Now, obviously, bankruptcy is not because you missed one payment. So there's some deeper issues there, but you got to start by making payments on time. So that's one of the biggest things we can fix. Age of credit. Any questions so far? No? Cool. Age of credit, right? So this is kind of medium impact, right? So 15% of that calculation comes down to age of credit. Obviously, age of credit is really just showing your experience. It's just this person has experience with credit. I'm not giving to somebody who doesn't know what they're doing. I can't just create time. It has to happen, right? So the only thing to do about age of credit is just have an older credit history. So although lenders like to see that experience, the only thing you can do is just keep making good choices and make your payments on time. And then as time goes on, this number will increase, right? So we want that to be 9 years. If you got your very first credit card 3 years ago, there's nothing you can do. You just keep working until you get there. And again, just remember this only makes up about 15%. So it's not the end of the world for that. So just keep accounts in good standing. One thing I do hear a lot from this actually is, people saying, oh, I have this really old account. I can't close it because it'll mess up my credit history, my age of credit. That is true. If you have an old account, and you close it, it will start to impact your age of credit. But it's not the end of the world, right? So I had a Bank of America credit card that I think I opened the day after graduation from high school. And I had it for 10 years or more. And one day I was I'm tired. It's a $500 credit limit. I never use this card. I never check it. It sits in a box somewhere. It's probably expired. It just left me open for fraud, right? So having that card that I never check left me open to somebody stealing my information and me not noticing it. So I decided to close that account. Did it impact my credit score? It did. My credit score actually decreased by about 20 points for a month, and then it bounced back. So it will have an impact, but it's not the end of the world, right? So you just build that time back up. Does that make sense? So if we have a card that we don't use anymore, or especially if that card charges an annual fee that we don't want to pay, that's something we can go ahead and get rid of. The only caveat there is if you have a large credit decision about to come up, hey, I'm going to be buying a house pretty soon. I don't want to fuck with anything. I don't want to change anything on these accounts. I want to leave it the same so I don't mess up that big purchase coming. All right, total accounts. This one's actually going to sound a little weird. They actually want you to have more total accounts, right? So more is better in this situation. And the idea there is it just shows more experience again. Right? So they want to see that you have different types of accounts, right? So let's say you have installment loans. Those are things that you pay regularly and consistently. That's car loans, mortgages, student loans, right? Installment loans. Revolving lines, they want to see that you have access to credit cards and you pay those off with variable payments. Open balances, which is things that you pay off full at the end of every month, like utilities, your cell phone bill, stuff like that. It also shows to them that other institutions have trusted you, so they can probably trust you as well. Target's going to be yeah, I'll give you a red card because, Amazon trusts you and you're doing pretty good over there. So you can also get your Nintendo Switch here at Target if they had any. And then a lot of people actually use this when they're trying to get closer to that 850, right? So if anybody here really wants to fight for that 850 credit score, that's a whole club of people that want to do it. They'll see this and say, oh, I only have 15 accounts, and it doesn't mean currently open, it means total accounts you've had. Those ones that you close, they stay in there. But maybe I have 15 accounts. I want to have closer to 21. Let me open a new line of credit, and then I'll get closer to the 850. But what that really does is it opens you up to more variables, right? So now there's more chance of fraud, which can decrease my stuff. There's more chance that the calculation gets messed up in another part of the thing, like the ripple effect of that change. So I would never recommend opening frivolous accounts just to increase your score, because in the long run, it's probably going to hurt you more than it's not. Most of you, especially those who took out loans for undergraduate degree, are going to have like 20 or 30 accounts anyway, because each semester was like a different loan. So it just filled up all your stuff. And it actually shows you when you run your credit report, because you probably had to scroll the whole bunch of times to get to the bottom, which is super fun. I review those all the time. And then hard inquiries, right? So this is the other 10% of this calculation. So how many times have you actually applied for credit in the last 2 years? So only in the last 2 years, they fall off after that. So just avoid unnecessary hard inquiries. So don't apply for 3 credit cards just so you can pick the best one. Pick the best one, then apply for that one. Take advantage of things that are pre-approved. Now this is not, when I say that, I don't mean like that letter you get in the mail when it's like, you're pre-approved for refinancing your student loans, $500 cash back. I feel like the myrrh is on there if I read it, but basically if you have a card with a bank, right? So I have a Chase Freedom card. Occasionally they'll offer me to upgrade that card to higher level, like a Chase Freedom Unlimited, or I can convert it to like a Chase Sapphire card. And it doesn't actually require credit being pulled because they have a history with me already. They know I pay my bills. They offer me something else. So that's something you could take advantage of. Another thing down here, multiple inquiries in a short period of time are generally grouped together. Now, this is mainly for like mortgages. So when we talk about home purchase next time, I'll tell you should shop your mortgage, meaning you should get a couple different quotes. And if I'm over here telling you in the same breath that I can't have more than 2 inquiries, how can I shop for 3 different mortgages at the same time? That's going to hurt me, right? So what this does is if you were to go out and look for 3 different mortgages all around the same time period, when the calculation goes, it should only be calculated as 1 mortgage because all you're trying to buy is 1 house. So it should only show up as 1. It doesn't always work that way, but that's the way that it's supposed to work. So that's the way we're going to treat it. Does that make sense? All right. Differences in scores, right? So we talked about how there's different little formulas, right? So there's multiple systems. Even in the FICO system, there's multiple scores in there. So we're going to have different formulas. We're also going to have different inputs, right? So if you remember back, my doctor's office only gave that 1 bill to TransUnion. So TransUnion had different data than Experian and then Equifax. So we're going to have different inputs combined with those different formulas to give me all different scores. So when I look at all 3 of those agencies, I may have 3 different scores, but they should be pretty close together, right? So if you see like a 20-point spread, maybe you're not too worried. If you see a 60-point spread, something's wrong. Let's go figure it out. Let's dig into that. It could be that you have a bill somewhere that you didn't know about. Sometimes it works the other way. We actually had a client that had 1 score that was like 60 points higher than the other 2 because they had an account added to their credit report that wasn't theirs, but that account had like a 40-year credit history. So it really improved their overall situation. So we're like, okay, we got to get this fixed, but maybe not just yet. Maybe we'll fix this later because it's a benefit to us right now. When people run your credit, they're not normally going to run multiple lines. They're just going to run 1. Other times they'll run all 3 and they'll take the middle one. So if I have a high or low, they'll just pick the third, like the middle one, number 2, and they'll go with that. So if you have outliers like that, it could help you or hurt you. So yeah, they should be fairly close. If they're not fairly close, we want to figure out why, and then at least understand if we want to make changes or not. Any questions about that? No? All right. Some other stuff. So a credit score, what can they not use to calculate the score, right? So they have all this data in your credit report, but can any of it not be used against me? Of course, they can't discriminate with your credit score. So they can't calculate based on age, sex, race, religion, marital status, employment history, occupation, salary, zip code, or whether or not you've disputed something in the past. Kinda. So they can't discriminate based on age, but they can use credit history. And if your credit history is only 3 years old, you're probably young. If your credit history is 40 years old, you're probably older. They can't do it based on marital status but they can see your report, and you may or may not have accounts with somebody who has the same last name as you. They can't use your occupation, salary, or employment history, but that data is used when applying for credit. So when you apply for a new credit card, it's going to say, how much do you make? What's your profession? Where do you work? So they're not using that for your SAP, for your score, but they're using that data in the credit granting decision. Does that make sense? So although they can't discriminate in the score, discrimination is still a thing, obviously. And then at the end of 2018, average FICO score was 695. So we want to be above average, right? So if we're above this, we're doing pretty good. That's why we have that 700 mark, and we want to shoot for 750. So generally speaking, young people suck at credit. It's probably because we don't learn about it anywhere. Maybe we should have got a class in high school or college or graduate school when we have all this debt, but nobody taught us anything about it. So generally speaking, when the worst kind of overall credit picture is in the younger than 30. So 2% are going to have 780 and above. In the 30s is when life generally hits a lot of people. So they bought a house, they got married, they had kids in their 30s. So actually the low end of the credit score actually increases during the 30s. And then everybody starts to get better over time. Now, I don't know if this 70-year-old person is just better at math or numbers or credit than me, or they just have a really old credit history. And I don't know, but generally I would assume that we just get better at living within our means over time because we have a better understanding of what our means are. Any questions about credit score? And we can talk about yeah, go ahead.
Does it matter like how much you pay in each shot? Because one of the things that I heard is like try and pay typically half of whatever you would charge on your credit card in a typical time frame in the first half of that time frame, and then save the rest for like 2 or 3 days before the rest of the balance is due to improve the score. I can't remember where I heard that from, but I'm guessing like the idea behind it is to show that, okay, I can still pay my bills even towards the end, not just like in one shot when I got a paycheck.
Yeah, so that math makes sense. So there's 2 things there. So I'm going to repeat that question to make sure I heard you right. So does it matter if I pay it all off at one time, or if I stretch my payments out over the month, or if it's at the beginning or the end, or does payment sequencing impact this score is the question. So mathematically it kind of does, right? So if we have a rolling average, like what was my credit card utilization throughout the month, and I take like a daily average, then that would change if you made extra payments. But to be honest, the reporting agencies just care the end of the month is what they care about. So did you pay your bills on time? I have a chat. If you have 2, I'm going to read that in a minute. So it doesn't really matter if you paid off throughout the month. You paid off. I pay my credit card at all different times of the month. Sometimes I paid off right after I make a big purchase because I don't like seeing it on there. Other times I wait till the end of the month because I forget, and I get a notification in my calendar that says pay your credit card, it's full. But yeah, if the agency is tracking it as complexly as they should, then it would matter. But generally speaking, they don't. So it doesn't really matter. Sonia says, if you have 2 cards with a balance, should you pay off the higher interest or the lower balance first? So that's really just a debt pay down question. That's really going to be up to you. So mathematically speaking, paying the higher interest off first is your best bet. But if it makes you feel better to see one of your balances go away, then paying off the lower balance first makes sense. That's more of a psychological question of whatever's going to keep you on track. So if you want to see those little steps in that snowball approach, do that. If you want to just do the highest interest first, that's mathematically the right way. But the highest interest may also be the highest balance, and you may see less progress on a month-by-month basis by attacking that one first. Hopefully that answered your question. If it didn't, yell at me. Anybody else got a question about credit score before I move on? Nope. All right, identity theft. Anybody have any experience with identity theft? Other than me? Just me, right? Nobody else is getting their card stolen to go to Village Inn? It's happened more than once. I don't know who has my credit card. They love Village Inn in like Buffalo. But so with identity theft, earlier we talked about the Fair and Accurate Credit Transactions Act, or the FACT Act. One of the things that FACT Act initiated was the ability to freeze your credit. So what a credit freeze does is it locks you out from applying for new credit. So a credit freeze does not impact anything that you already have. It doesn't mess with your credit cards right now, but it blocks you and makes you invisible when you're making new credit, right? So if your credit is frozen, you went to go apply for new credit, they wouldn't be able to run your stuff because you're frozen out of the system. So the idea there is, I think somebody may have stolen my information. I'm worried about my credit being stolen. Let me just freeze my credit now. Nobody can do anything. And then if I need to unfreeze it or thaw it, I hate using that term, but if you want to thaw your credit later, you can do it, right? So you would go to each agencies directly. So you go to Equifax, you go to Experian, you go to TransUnion. You'd say, hey, hello, I want to freeze my credit. And they'd say, okay, they'd ask you a bunch of questions. And then they give you a PIN number, and that PIN number you'll use whenever you want to unfreeze it in the future. It takes about 15 minutes. It's free. It was a service that the government kind of put into place during that Fair and Accurate Credit Transactions Act. And then when you just have to unfreeze it whenever you want to do it, right? So that's a free service. And there's also a credit lock. A credit lock does effectively the same thing, just more efficiently, and you have to pay for it. So a credit lock, as you saw in that TransUnion thing, you could just lock your credit. It gives you a key. So you can lock and unlock it on your own without having to call somebody whenever you want. But they charge you a fee. It could be, $10 a month. So again, this would be is either A, you think your information has been compromised and you're worried about new lines being opened, or B, you just want that warm and fuzzy. So you basically freeze it or lock it yourself, and then you know that nothing can happen until a later date. We have some clients that'll just leave their credit frozen all the time because they have no need to open new lines of credit. I mean, how often do you actually open new lines of credit? I have a couple credit cards right now. If I were to open a new credit card maybe next year, maybe I want to buy a new house or refinance my house next year. Maybe I want to do this, that, and the other in the future, then I can unfreeze it or unlock it. But this is kind of the reason to do it. Does that make sense? So a credit freeze is free, a credit lock you pay for, but they effectively do the same thing. All right, so your scores and stuff like this. So these are the things that we want to care about when we look at it, right? So what was your credit score, right? That's the big thing that people are going to look at, right? So it's not the most important data. The report is the most important data, but people don't look at the report. They just look at the score. So let's know what the score is. And let's compare it to our peers and where we need to be personally. And then we look at the credit report and we'll say, all right, are there any fraud indicators on there? And a lot of times it'll actually say fraud indicators 0, fraud indicators 1. And it'll call it out for you. Are there any adverse accounts? It should call out. And then what's the average account age? Those credit score calculations are obscure. We don't know what the actual calculation is or how to run it. So knowing this average account age doesn't give you a lot of information here, but it's just so you could know personally. Some recommendations. So these are some things everyone should be doing, right? So we want to run our credit report at least twice a year. Generally, I think the thing we recommend to our clients is once in the spring and once in the fall. So whenever the clocks change, check your credit. So with annualcreditreport.com, which is the federal service, you can get 1 credit report per year per agency. So that's 3 reports. So if I run it twice a year, I get 1 and 1. I run a third whenever I want to. Thanks to COVID right now, you can run reports all the time and there's no issue. So as long as that stays in effect, you can run as many as you want without any problems. But we recommend at least twice a year, just to give us that warm and fuzzy to make sure we have no inaccuracies. With a credit score, consider a freeze, right? If you're not going to make any moves in the next year or two, freeze your credit. It doesn't hurt anything. It makes it harder if you want to buy something on a whim, right? My credit card still works, but if I want to go out and buy a car, then I would have to apply for credit for that. So that I could just freeze my credit. Credit Karma, great tool, or if your bank has a credit monitoring service, those are really valuable. We'll say on here, don't close any old accounts, but that's not necessarily true, right? So if an account charges an annual fee, most credit cards should not be charging annual fees anymore unless it's a travel card and they give me like buku rewards. Like a Chase Sapphire card is like $500 annual fee, but I get all that back if I do it properly. But if you have like a Kohl's card from Capital One and they're charging me like $25 a year, like forget that card. Like let's get rid of that and move on with our day. And then again, if you have an old card that you're never going to use, you're never going to check, it can be safer in the long run just to close that out and not have to worry about it. Identity theft. So never send out sensitive information via email. You guys are already good at this. Most of everybody here is going to be HIPAA compliant in their normal lives. So when we work with our clients, we don't let them email us stuff like that. We just upload it to the vault. We have a Google Share drive that we share with clients as well. So like do that. And if someone ever asks you for sensitive information via email, you basically just tell them to fuck off because they should know better than that. And then utilizing password services, right? So how does your information get stolen, right? So there's a couple different ways that your information got stolen. So it could be like a credit card swiper. So someone had like put a device over a credit card scanner. It could be someone stole your information directly from you. It could be that they got your username and password from stuff, right? So we like to use password management tools on your computer. So the one that I like is called LastPass. I use it personally, I use it professionally. There's a free version and there's a paid version. The free version works perfectly fine. You don't need to pay anything. You can download it on your phone, you can put it on your web browser. And what it does is just like your keychain on your computer, where basically your computer remembers your passwords for you. This does the same thing, but it can be cross-device. So I can go on my phone and I can say, what's my Netflix password? Because I don't know what it is, because LastPass gave me some like 15 character password that's like 40% special characters, and I have no idea what it looks like. And it saves that for me. It also does 2 extra things. So if I ever get a spoofed website, so I'm sure you've heard about like somebody sending you to what looks like your bank, but it's not actually your bank. LastPass will recognize that this is not your bank, and it's not going to give you the password because it's not the right place. So that's a benefit. You can't accidentally put it in. And the other one is I call the Netflix effect. So I have Netflix. I share it with my sister. I don't want to give it to my sister's husband because he'll give it to his whole family. His family's like way bigger than mine. And I don't want all these people on my Netflix, because when I'm trying to watch, I don't know, Gilmore Girls, like I don't want somebody else kicking me off of that, okay? So what I can do is I can actually just share the link via LastPass, and she can use the username and password, but she can't see the username and password. So she can connect to it and she can get on Netflix, but she can't give it to anybody else because she doesn't actually have it. So that's like a huge benefit just for Gilmore Girls. But that's some recommendations that we have for most things. So now we're on to my favorite slide, where we just sit here and we bullshit for the next however long you guys want to stay on the phone with me. So questions, comments, concerns about credit first, or credit reports. Does anybody want to pull theirs up and ask me questions directly from it? Does anybody need to see a template of something, or does Austin just want to cut me off? What's up?
I got a couple different questions. I called, I think it was SoFi that I called. Now this was months back, but I was just curious, what credit score did I need to get the best rate with no cosigner? And I thought they told me like 740. Does that sound right?
Yeah. So every agency or every credit granting company, right, is going to have their own little barrier of entry. And it used to be lower, right? So it used to be like 700, 720. Now we're hearing more closer to 750. So if they said it was 740, that's pretty much in line with that. So that's where they say you have excellent credit. And if excellent credit, they don't need anything else. You're just good to go. So if they said 740 is what you needed, then that's what we want to shoot for.
Cool.
And
next question is, as far as how big of a hit, say, no telling with the election going on, everything else about refinancing after the first of the year, but if you're going to buy a house and refinance, should you do one or the other first? I mean, is it going to be such a big hit, like buying a house, that you're going to wish you would have refinanced first?
No, they should be similar. So a lot of times buying a house is actually going to improve your credit. So it sounds funny, right? Because I'm picking up all this new debt, but it's collateralized debt, right? So there's a house attached to it. So it's not super scary for the lender. And then beyond that, now you have that new type of credit. So you're getting a new account, you're getting a varied experience via credit. So buying a house actually increases your score. We've had other clients that'll say things like, oh, I paid my car off and my credit dropped 40 points. Like, what the fuck? And that's just like a quirk in the calculation of sometimes paying down debt actually hurts you. But you can't let your credit score, you can't let the tail wag the dog. So we got to kind of do what's right, and then the system will flush itself out eventually. So if the question is, is there an order of operations there for which one should happen first? Not really. I would say the home purchase is probably a bigger deal because you're going to have that home loan longer than you'd have student loans, right? So we're talking about a 30-year mortgage maybe, and we're talking maybe like a 10 or 20-year student loans by payback schedule. So I want to make sure I get a better interest rate on the longer time period. So I would probably say the home purchase would go first, but if you're ready to refinance and you're not ready to purchase, then refinance is the one you do first because you're ready for it. Who knows when you're going to get to that point of ready to purchase a home? I wouldn't delay one just so I could do the other first. So speaking in a circle there, did I answer that question at all?
Yeah, that was perfect. Thank you.
Cool. What else you got? You guys sign along?
So I had a question too. I think my score is pretty well. I use Bank of America and it gives me my FICO score there. But I've also seen it fluctuate so much from different places and stuff like that, just from hearing from other people too. Is there like a preferred one that you can really trust, or are you just kind of like always kind of just taking it as you go from different places?
Yeah, so your credit score only matters to the person that's running your credit, right?
Okay.
So the best place to get the credit from is from the person who ran it and said you're good or you're bad. So whenever you apply for credit, let's say you buy a car, you buy a house or something, if someone runs your credit, they're obligated to give it to you if you ask.
Okay.
So if you ever apply for something, they have to give you that report. So that's the most important one. If you're getting like wildly different stuff, like that is kind of stressful, but you shouldn't be checking from that many places, to be honest. I just try to stay consistent. So I check through Discover right now. I used to be through Experian directly. Now I just pick one, and this is where I search from. And then I pull my reports from the other two agencies. Just to kind of compare that they're similar, but just being consistent because then I can track it, right? So Discover, it'll show me month after month, like, hey, my flat line here, I peaked and I shot down. Like, what the fuck was that? I don't know. But I'm flatlined again. So there's just a kind of odd thing that happens.
Okay, yeah, because I just use Bank of America,
Mhm.
but my brother, he has multiple banks and he also uses Credit Karma and all this stuff, and he shows like there's significant difference sometimes, and it doesn't make sense to me, but that clears it up.
So a lot of times they're actually running from different time points too. So if you're at a bank that just is like slower, they may be using month or two old data to run these reports. So it's not always like just in time numbers. It's kind of whenever they got the last set of data. So he may be seeing current, past, and paster data.
Okay.
I'm sticking with that. Yeah.
And I know we kind of touched on it, but is there really any reason to like shoot for 850? Like if you're at a pretty good score?
No.
Like honestly, I fluctuate between 780 and 790.
You're good.
Okay.
Yeah. My credit score right now is like 785, I think. And I'm perfectly happy. There's no benefit to being any higher. Most credit agencies are going to say 750 and above is like their limit, right? So they have their tiers of what's approval, right? So, hey, if you have 650 and below, you're not allowed. Like 650 to 700, this is your interest rate. 7 to 750, this is your interest rate. 750 and above is generally how they're going to do it.
Okay.
So if I'm and above, then I'm and above. It doesn't mean how much and abover I am. So I would not do that. What I have seen is people start to work towards that 850 and then start doing things that impact the calculation in a negative way and actually start creeping down.
Okay. That makes sense.
If you want to join the 850 club, there's a whole community online. They can tell you how to do it. But no.
I think that sounds like unnecessary stress.
Definitely. But if that's your hobby, that's your hobby. I mean, that's got to be somebody's hobby. So
That's fair.
yeah, that's a good question.
And I think another thing to kind of go off of that. So I know like all I really have is student loans and my credit card, just one credit card. I pay that off every month, and I was kind of interested what Carol had to say about paying at different times, but I don't think that you kind of pointed that out, it doesn't matter. But if I do pay off my loans and I'm living pretty frugally and I don't make those giant purchases, is that going to affect my credit in the long run too?
Yeah. So one of the bad things is like lack of use of credit is sometimes viewed negatively, which sounds counterintuitive, right? You'd think, hey, I'm making good money, I'm paying all my bills, I'm living a cash lifestyle even. I don't need this. That should be a good thing. But from an agency they want to know that you're going to keep taking credit, you're going to keep paying them, right? This is an industry that's built on interest rates. So if you're not paying the interest rates to somebody, then you're not a good enough client for them. So there is something to be said for that. But in reality, if you have good credit right now, so we'll just talk about you specifically. So right now you're in the 780s, so you're good to go. So if you paid off all your student loans and you use your credit card monthly, like you may start to see it kind of level out, but your credit history is going to be there for the next 10 years, right? So that's going to hold you up. Your payment history is going to still be solid because it's a percentage. It's not a numbers game, right? Your number of accounts will fall off over time. So as those old accounts get older, they'll start to fall off. So that will start to impact you. But new things are going to happen. You're going to want to get a house at some point, or a condo, or a boat, or a plane, or who knows what people buy. So like new avenues for credit will pop up.
Okay.
So I'm not super worried about that, but it may be an issue for a little while. So there may be things at a certain point you just say, hey, I'll get a new credit card. Never take on debt to improve your credit score. But if you're going to try to improve your credit score, there's also certain ways you can do that. There's another tool made by Experian called Experian Credit Boost. That's generally used for people to rebuild their credit. So if you have poor credit, you can use Experian Credit Boost. What it does, it's a free service, and they just connect like your cell phone bill. So something you're paying, it's an open balance, you're paying every month anyway. They just put that history in your credit report so it can give you more credit history. So if we're getting to a point where we have less accounts, we can add some of those accounts to kind of level that out.
I didn't know that. That's good to know.
I'm sure there's other services out there. I once was buying a fridge from a used appliance store, and the guy said for $500 he would write it up that I've been paying a loan for like 2 years. Sounded super shady, but I'm sure there's like legal versions of that out there. But there's a ton of services, but they're mostly for credit repair. So you're more looking at credits like maintaining. You're in the clear.
Okay, cool. That's all I had. Thank you.
All right. Who else? Anybody else got questions that are credit related at first? Nobody. All right. Anybody got questions that are not related to credit? We can do anything out there. Anything new in the world? I got one. What would you say is overall more strategic, paying off high loans as fast as possible, or being more conservative and putting less towards said loans and more into savings? So in general, what's better, to pay off debt or to save? In general, I would say paying off debt is better. Paying off debt is a guaranteed return of investment, right? So if you have a credit card that has an interest rate of like somewhere like 19%, every extra dollar you pay towards that is a guaranteed 19% return, because I'm not going to pay that interest. You need to have savings though, right? If you don't have savings in place, you're going to fall back into that debt. So I would say the first thing, and Dave Ramsey's actually really good at this. He has his baby steps of getting out of debt. And the first thing is like have $1,000, right? So if you first have $1,000 and then attack high interest and then build up your full emergency savings fund and then go back. So it's kind of a combination. If you have substantial savings, I mean, you can survive, a month or two of down times in the world, then I would say being more aggressive towards debt is a much better place to be at. Does that make sense, Lindsay? I'll take a thumbs up or yes, cool. Yeah, cool. If you have anything more specific on that, I'll be happy to dig into it. Someone, were you just joining or did you have a question? That was really loud.
I just got disconnected, sorry.
That's okay. We're just answering questions now. So if anybody else has any other questions, credit related, unrelated, The time is now.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Are there any purchases that are favorable to do on the credit, like paying rent? Like, I don't know.
So like different like ways to use credit, like different purchases that you
Yeah.
should use credit for?
Yeah,
That's a
like,
phenomenal question. Yeah, it depends on your credit cards. Okay, so two things here. So one, if you're ever shopping online, I would rather use a credit card than a debit card. So using a credit card is safer than using a debit card. So a debit card is your money. And if your money gets stolen, it's yours and you have to fight to get it back. Using a credit card is their company money, right? So that's MasterCard's money. MasterCard's going to get their money back. Like I'm not worried about them. And they can just cancel out a charge. So if I'm ever using something online or anything like that, I never use my debit card. Debit cards are specifically to draw cash for me. Some people don't like credit cards, that's its own thing. But as far as purchases to put on a credit card is really going to depend on the card that you have, right? So I have the Chase Freedom card, and it's got 1% for this, 2% for this, 5% every quarter that shifts, right? So those things are more valuable for me to put on my card. I used to have a Costco card, and a Costco card's like, oh, 4% if you do this, 3% if you do this, right? If you have a travel card, then all your travel expenses. You mentioned rent specifically, so I'll touch on that. A lot of places will not allow you to use a credit card to pay them because they have to pay a fee. So I'll use us specifically. So Your Financial Pharmacist, we charge a monthly fee to our clients. Clients want to say, hey, can I use my credit card so I can get credit card points? And we say no, because you may be getting 2 points, but I have to pay 3 points for you to use your credit card. So those points that you're earning come from somebody. So a lot of places will not allow you to pay rent with a credit card. If you can pay rent with a credit card and they don't charge you an additional fee for it, that's phenomenal. Take those free points and then just use those if your credit card is doing it. I have had friends do that in the past where there was no rules that said they couldn't do it. They didn't get charged anything extra. And they just paid, it was in California, it's like $2,000 a month, straight points, right? That's just, they're getting free money back. So that's definitely something I would do. Other things that are great to put on credit cards, even if you have the money, honestly, everything. I live off my credit cards and then I just pay them off. And the reason for that is a couple things. One, a lot of times if you purchase with the credit card, you may get extended warranties available just for your credit card, right? And also for tracking purposes. If I use cash for everything, I have to have like a ledger to track all my spending. If I just use my Visa card for everything, Visa tracks everything for me. And it tracks it all in one place, even though I pay the credit card bill from different places. So for someone who is stable in their spending and financially secure and good with credit cards, I like to use credit cards for everything. Starting out, I would never recommend somebody use credit cards for everything because plastic is a lot easier to swipe than cash is out of the pocket. But general information is I generally like to do everything on a credit card. Does that answer your question?
yeah, thank you. I have a follow-up question.
Yeah.
So you say you make most of your purchases with a credit card. Is there like a certain percentage? Do you purchase like the full amount on your credit card? Like, do you max out on your credit card every month, or do you purchase, like you use maybe 70% of your allowed amount?
So when I had a lower credit limit, I would use my card less just because I didn't like that balance, or I'd pay my card off more often. But to be honest, I've never thought about it again. Now, like I've just extended my credit limit. So we'll talk about me specifically, right? So my main Visa card I use is a joint card. We use it for everything we purchase. I think the limit's like $15,000. If I spent $15,000 in a month, like I'm fucked up. I did something wrong, or like that Nintendo Switch on eBay was really overpriced. So I really want a Switch right now. I just can't find one. So there's not like a limit. I never carry the balance is the big thing. So month to month, I don't carry a balance over. If I find myself in a position where I am beginning to carry a balance, right? I can't pay it all off at the end of the month, then I will stop using my credit card until that is paid off. So if I have a balance one month, there is no credit card next month. It's all cash until I pay my credit card off, and then I move on. But for the most part, I don't worry about intra-month balances. I just care about the end of the month. It's going to be really personal though, right? So if your credit card is a stress reliever or a stress creator, it's going to change the way that you use it. So if seeing a credit card balance is going to bother you, don't use it, right? Credit's not the end of the world. But if you're okay just making all the charges on there and paying them all off, that's financially the best thing because I get points from every purchase that I make. So any purchase I make out of cash or out of my debit card, I do not get the points that I would have received via credit card. But those points are not worth it if I go into debt and have to pay interest. That interest is going to go way faster than those points did. 2% cash back gets ate up real quick and I'm paying 19% to hold balance. So does that make sense?
Yeah. All right. Thank you.
Cool. These are good questions, Joe. Anybody else got a question about credit or not? Allison's not here tonight with her viewing party. All right, well then it's an early night. You almost got me in time. These are supposed to be like an hour long. It's almost an hour, like it's an hour and 10. So what we're gonna do next time, we'll talk about home purchase. So we will post this, video, we'll post this slide deck on the Mighty Networks. We'll also send out the home purchase worksheet that I'm going to go over next time. So you guys can kind of play around with that in advance. And then we'll be ready to talk home purchase. I would say next week or 2 weeks from now, next session, we'll probably go a little long because there's probably going to be a lot of questions for home purchase, which is very good to have. I've personally purchased 2 homes. I've obviously helped clients purchase a whole bunch of homes. So I'm more than happy to sit here as long as we need to answer those questions. If there's nothing else, everybody have a good night, and I'm going to go cook some chicken.
Good night. Thank you.
Good night. Thank
All
you.
right, thank